So Brinsley, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Who am I? So I'm someone who's very curious and I love being in conversation with people. Yeah, what I see with a lot of coaches is the same journey that I've been on. It's a real evolving process.
Yeah, I love it. And I really appreciate you saying the ebb and flow and the different stages of our life.
Yeah, my eyes glazed over and I was like, this is it.
As you were telling the story, tears were coming up into my eyes.
And I was like, do I want to be that person, the guy that owns that restaurant? Do I want to be that person, the head chef? And the answer was so easy for me. It was just no. I don't want to be them.
There was something happening in your system as you were thinking about the question.
It's true. It's so easy to keep eating other people's ideas and views and beliefs because we take that on in our youth, right?
I'll say to coaches, there is no one else like you. And there might be thousands of people searching for you.
Hello listeners, we are your co-hosts Janine Bailey and Marie Quigley for the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. Empower World brings guests who are making a difference to the world to inspire coaches and leaders who lead with mind, heart and soul.
Welcome to the Empower World podcast, listeners. My name, as you know, is Marie Quigley, and I'm not with my wonderful business partner, Janine Bailey, today. She's travelling around Australia at the moment. But I am with the wonderful Brinsley Kazak, and I'm so delighted to introduce Brinsley to our Empower World community because I don't often comment on people who talk about building their business or developing their business on LinkedIn, because often it feels like the messages that they're sending to coaches just don't feel authentic, or they don't speak to me in a way that I understand how I've built my business. But interestingly enough, Brinsley's message did resonate with me, and I commented on it and I read more about Brinsley's work, and I thought we have to have him on the podcast because it's going to be so useful for our community to listen to what you have to say, Brinsley. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for such a lovely introduction. Yeah, and I remember the post and I remember you commenting on it. And yeah, it's interesting how things resonate like that with us. And I think that's a real crucial part of, putting our content out there and speaking our truth and finding our authenticity, shall we say.
Absolutely.
Share our message. So thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
And thank you for saying yes. So Brinsley, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Who am I? Wow, that's a big question, isn't it? We could do an hour on that. We could go down the Jungian rabbit holes. But yeah, like high level, who am I? So I'm someone who's very curious and I love being in conversation with people. I love it more than anything, actually. I've always been a people person. So all of my careers throughout my whole life, I was a DJ, then I decided I wanted to be a chef for a little while, and then it was a coach. It was always about bringing people together and community and having some kind of exchange. So that's kind of what led me to coaching. I think my curiosity and my people-focused nature, shall we say. And in terms of, what was the other part of the question?
Tell us about your work.
My work, yeah. So I trained as a coach 5 years ago. And yeah, what I see with a lot of coaches is the same journey that I've been on. It's a real evolving process. So when I first started train as a coach, I had no idea I'd be here and have this focus. So I've gone through coaching professionals, coaching young people, coaching in schools, young people, teachers, as well as everything from coaching around the campfire, in the forest, text-based coaching, you name it, life coaching, professional coaching. But where I am now is I'm exclusively helping coaches build their business and really kind of decondition all the stuff that they've taken on in life that hold them back from building their business. As well as that, I'm heavily involved in men's work. So about a few years ago, I got involved in men's work and men's circles. And that's a lot of the work that I do in the forest and around the campfire. And we really explore what it means to be a man, themes such as masculinity. And then another topic that's kind of emerged for me whilst I've been developing my practice is neurodiversity and ADHD. So that's a lived experience I have and I have with my children. And what I noticed is like the ebb and flow of my business or the interest areas that I like to apply coaching has very much followed the ebb and flow of my life. So there'll probably be different answers as the years go on, but that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I love it. And I really appreciate you saying the ebb and flow and the different stages of our life can impact how we work, who we are when we're working, and also how we develop our business. And that's really sparked my curiosity about why did you want to become a coach? How did you even know that this was something you wanted to move into after DJing and being a chef?
Yeah, I actually haven't spoke about this moment very often, because normally I get asked this question all the time, because I kind of mentioned that I help a lot of coaches on their journey. And before I went full-time in my coaching business, I used to work for a training provider.
Okay.
And I was having conversations all day long with coaches or prospective coaches, helping them decide whether coaching was the right journey for them, whether the training provider I worked for was a good fit, and what their blockers were to hold them back. So they'd always ask me, like, well, why did you become a coach? And I kind of gave them the more recent version, but there was actually a moment when I was chefing, and I kind of took I call it a wrong turning. So when I crashed out of my DJ and promoting career, I was kind of a bit burnt out and bored out, and I had an entrepreneurial mind, and I wanted to do something. So I thought, I'll set up a restaurant. Whilst I was doing that, we moved into a house in London, and we lived next to this guy called Ralph. He was 90 years old, and he lost his wife, sadly, and they were married for like 30 years. And me and him used to have a lot of chats over the fence. And yeah, one day I said, I want to come round and let's spend some time together. And we were sat in his living room in the armchair, and there was just a moment when like my eyes glazed over, and we were having a really deep conversation about him, his grief, and his wife. And as well as being like, I dropped into this kind of seminal space that I was really with him and very present, but also very present with myself and what was going on. And it just felt like a really meaningful and important moment. But yeah, my eyes glazed over, and I was like, this is it. It's this. It's these meaningful conversations. This is what I want to be doing. Weirdly, though, I didn't give it too much thought after that. I just kind of went back into my life. I had 2 kids. We were busy. And yeah, I think that was one of the moments where I was like, could be this. Conversations.
Yeah. It's funny as you describe that. I noticed how, as you were telling the story, tears were coming up into my eyes. And I noticed my body almost kind of resonating with what you're saying, the kind of tapping into the wisdom that you had in that moment. These moments often come to us. We recognize them, we feel them, we experience them. We know it's true for ourselves, and yet we go back into the everyday life. So how many times did you have to hear that message before you decided, this is how I want to work, this is how I want to be in the world?
That's a really good question. And I also, just to reflect on what you said, I really love that you used the word feel, because we feel into it, don't we? It's like a felt sense we have. It's almost embodied when we have those insights, because there's thinking insights and then there's feeling insights, and that was really a feeling insight. How many times did that happen to me before I made the decision? I can't remember. I mean, there's been multiple occasions across the years where I've held back on doing a thing or pushing forward and building the coaching business or working with clients. But at that stage in my life, I was really still trying to figure it out. And once I got it now. So it got to like 3 years later, and I was still chefing. I'd worked my way up to be a head chef, and I was looking around at the people in the industry, and I was like, do I want to be that person, the guy that owns that restaurant? Do I want to be that person, the head chef? And the answer was so easy for me. It was just no. I don't want to be them. I don't want to be like that. And that was another realization that I'd taken the wrong turning. the way I refer to it is like my Louis Theroux weird weekend. So I had this like interesting career for 10 years, DJing and promoting. I loved it. And what happened. And then my next stage, I decided to pursue something that was a hobby. And actually it should have stayed as a hobby. But I learned my lessons, and I realized that I didn't want to become the restaurant owner or the head chef. But then I was like, well, what do I want to be? And I had this kind of identity crisis, because my identity was all wrapped up in my previous career of being a DJ and a musician and being that guy, quote unquote. And I felt really stuck. I was like, I don't actually know who I am anymore. That was like the things that I used to say. So my whole identity was wrapped up in my job, and it's something that I think is a big part of who I am, the expression of who I am. And yeah, someone recommended, my ex-partner recommended that I work with a coach to perhaps unpack some of my ideas about what I might want to do. And my initial ideas were, be a counsellor, be a youth worker, be a music therapist, or be a coach. That had kind of come into play, because all through my life, I'd always liked supporting people and helping them. So then I worked with a coach, and I explored all these ideas. And what I really loved about the process was, we didn't just dive into what do you want to do. We dived into who are you? What is your identity? What are your values? What lights you up? When were you last in flow? And started having those conversations. And then the light bulb started to kind of flick on even more. I was like, oh, okay, I like this. I can see myself doing this. So from that moment, it was kind of full steam ahead, quote unquote, because there's been a few blockages as well. And then once I read Animas Centre for Coaching's content, it really resonated with me. The words they were using, transformation, working at a deeper level with beliefs, and self-reflection, all of that, it really resonated with me. So I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to go for it. And that's kind of how I went for it. That's the short story.
Yeah. And I notice how beautiful it is. And when I asked the question, you gave yourself time to think about it. So there was something happening in your system as you were thinking about the question and how to answer it. And it sounds like as you were discovering who you were and what you wanted to be, there was things happening in your system as well that were allowing you to integrate the work with your coach, the tapping into your own wisdom and values, and that processing allows us to get clearer. So just as you took a moment to clarify something for yourself and had the wisdom to answer it, it sounds like that was also part of the process for you, Brinsley, in uncovering what you want.
Yeah, what a great reflection. I think it's a really great connection. Yeah, completely that. It's figuring out. It was taking a moment to reflect and figure out. I think it's this like, something I've been speaking to a lot recently, a lot of people about recently, is this whole idea that like, what is personal development? And one of the things I land on is it feels like it's just a journey back to self, always becoming who we really are, truly are. And I think, that Jung's concept of individuation came up in a conversation recently, but for me, just the way to say it clearly is, who am I? Like, coming back to that feels like personal development work at its core. Who are you? And it feels like that's the lifelong journey if we're on it on.
Yeah, I absolutely resonate that. When people work with me as a professional coach, and they'll say, I need to make these changes, and I'll invite them to think about how can they remember who they truly are? How can they remember to tap into that wisdom that's always been there, but has been covered up by schooling, by other people's values or beliefs that we've eaten for lunch, dinner, and we just can't digest it anymore because it's not actually what we need to feed ourselves with. So I love that you talk about rediscovering who we are. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. And I love your analogy there of the digestion, and we keep eating it. It's true. It's so easy to keep eating other people's ideas and views and beliefs because we take that on in our youth, right? From the systems, parenting, from the bullies, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And then that shows up in the way we live our life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you help coaches build their practice, Brinsley, and yet you have this deep sense of wanting to understand yourself and helping people understand themselves. It feels different to the traditional way of looking at marketing or building a business. So talk to me about how you do what you do.
Thank you. Yeah, it's probably not that traditional in the sense that I think a lot of people think that business coaching is traditionally about what you do. It's about practical. But for me, business is just part of life. And the part that I like to coach from, or the space I like to coach people on, is not only what they're doing, but who they're being. And that brings it all together because it feels a bit more holistic then. It's like, who are you as a human being? And, what are your values? And who might be your ideal clients? What are the experiences you've been through as a human being? How did you overcome them? Who might you like to help? And why is that important to you? So, as well as, strategy, shall we say, if we're going to use some sort of business talk, product development, marketing, sales, there's also who's the human being. And that's the way I like to work. What someone's doing, but also who they're being, because it's not just practical, it's emotional too. And yes, we're building our business, but we're also building ourselves up. It's the same thing.
Absolutely. So in my experience, as coaches become trained and then move into the world of developing their business, because it's developing their practice is one thing, but developing their business is another thing. How do you translate? Because that sounds very esoteric. That sounds, I understand it, who am I being in my work? But how does that translate into how somebody would build their business? For example, how did you do it? And thinking about who you are, and what were the challenges that you faced doing it?
So the challenges that I faced is really all of it was underpinned by, I would say, childhood wounds. And this is kind of something that is coming really present for me at the minute in my work. And the core childhood wound for me was, I'm not good enough. Another one that I often see is, I'm not important, or I'm not wanted, or no one cares what I have to say. I see time and time again in my own practice and other people that these childhood wounds show up in our challenges. When we get right down to the core conversation or the belief that we have about ourselves, which stops us, shall we say, making an invite, telling someone we're a coach, putting something out there on social media, sharing what we actually think rather than saying what we think we should be saying. All of that stuff is underpinned usually by one of those core conversations. There's a few other ones, but so when I really think about, what was my big challenges, it really came from the core conversations that I had with myself, which came from childhood experiences. And then that shows up in those ways that I just mentioned.
Yeah. So the I'm not enough, practically, how did it show up when you were thinking about putting yourself out there, growing your practice, asking clients to come and work with you?
Yeah, so how it showed up was when I went on coach training, what happened was I realized that I had a very low self-worth, very low confidence. And we were in the training, and when questions go around the room and people put their hands up, I was shaking. I had like a trauma response. But in my first coaching session as well, like my hand was shaking on the table. But rewind 5 years, I was DJing in front of people, thousand people in an event, like really in flow. So it was like this weird like dichotomy of being like kind of having confidence or perceived confidence in this arena, but then having no confidence in that arena, which was the coaching arena. And one of the things that I identified was I was wearing a mask. And the story that I told myself was, I need to be someone different before I can be a coach. I looked around at who was in the room. There was a lot of professionals, quote unquote. I came from this different kind of arena, which on the surface didn't look professional, even though it was a professional business that we'd had and we were very successful in that. It didn't match up with what I was seeing in the coaching room. So then I created a story that I needed to be someone else before I can be a coach. So I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough as I am. And then I masked up. So then what happens was, when I masked up, was I show up on coaching calls inhibited, pretending to be someone else. I couldn't find my flow in the conversation. People feel that straight away. I feel it. I feel uncomfortable. So there's this thing that I want to do. I remember like getting teary when I was supporting that other man on the sofa, Ralph. But then I'm also in this space feeling really uncomfortable. And like, this doesn't feel good. So it's this really weird tension between trying to figure that out. And at the time I had no idea, because this is me talking with hindsight, rather than at the time where I didn't have the hindsight to see what was going on. Other practical ways, as well as pretending to be someone else, was you're really undervaluing my services and what coaching can do. So I would charge like £10 a session. Or I remember at the start apologising to someone because I was going to charge them a £25 admin fee for a block of 6 sessions, £25. But that felt so true for me and real for me at the time that was like what I could charge. And now when I look at it, I'm like, wow. But I also recognise that there are a lot of people in that mental model or paradigm, and whilst I don't see it as true, I also don't see it as shameful, because I get it, because they're going through something that has them believe something which is the same or similar to what I went through, that had me believe something which is about my self-worth, how I could show up, what I can charge for my services. There's so much in this question as well, because even the small thing of making an invitation, which was essentially what brought us together. I wrote a post about making invitations, and I think the title of the post was, what's the single most important factor of building a coaching business? And, a mantra I always like is no conversations, no business. But before the conversation, there needs to be an invitation. And that's to connect, to have the coaching call, to work together, whatever that might be, to share a little bit about how I work. That's all invitations. And it can happen online and offline. Offline, it's slightly easier because we're behind the screen and the keyboard. Offline, in person, something else happens because we're in front of someone in one way. So it's these same responses that I'd get, like the I'm not good enough, the trauma response, I don't want to look salesy, I don't want to put someone off. All that stuff shows up in my business building journey, and it stopped me doing the thing that would help me move forward. So the actions I took, and then the space that I was operating from, or energetically where I was coming from, to use perhaps not being as a terminology, energetically where I was coming from was, I'm not good enough. And that just showed up in all my business.
Yeah. This is a conversation I've had with myself when I started my own business. And I put off becoming a coach for 12 years, actually, because of all my saboteurs and my beliefs of not good enough, not clever enough, not wise enough, all of the things. And it stopped me in so many ways. And now, as I've done my own work on uncovering those beliefs and choosing to let them go and replace them, but recognizing that they'll always be there to kind of keep me safe. Their belief is that they're keeping me safe. But I hear this time and time again from coaches that we train. They're brilliant coaches, and yet something stops them seeing their value. So what did you do, Brinsley? How did you work through those childhood wounds, as you so beautifully described them, to allow you to be brave enough to put your work out there, to put your voice out there?
For me, it was a really slow process, and it kind of happened over 5 years, but it didn't need to be that long. That's the first thing I'll say. When I look back, it didn't need to take that long for me.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so many different ways I can answer this. So I'll just answer a few and let's see what comes up. So working with a coach, a business coach that has been there and done it and helps other people walk that walk, was vital for me to be well held in the space. something else that happened, it wasn't a one-to-one piece of work. It was group work. And I kind of really flourished in being in group work. And what I love about group work was not only do I get the wisdom and the coaching from my coach at the time, Ryan Matthew, but I also got the wisdom and insight and coaching from the other coaches in the group. And we met weekly. So there was something happening. I was like in a container. I felt safe. And we were doing this together. And that kind of like helped me kind of like feel a bit more safe. But there's been like an ebb and flow of my business where I've kind of put my head above the parapet and then come back down again. And I've put it back up again and I've come back down again. How did I think what you said was important. It's always there. It can always be there. That I'm not good enough is like a safety mechanism. So whilst I recognize it's not there, or rather it's always going to be there but not serving me, really it was about accessing courage. Because I think there can be a lot of spaces where we feel like we're going to therapize confidence. And I don't think that happens. I think confidence is built from courage to take actions. And then just knowing that someone's got your back to take the actions, and then we've got a data point to learn from and move forward, it can feel really liberating. And I was really hidden in my box for a lot of years, just not too scared to put a post out there saying about what I actually thought or just giving an opinion, because it was all through the fear of judgment and being wrong. And no one wants to be judged or made to be wrong, but that was the story that was coming up for me. So how I can't actually pinpoint it like a real specific thing that helped me break through, other than working with a coach, it feeling like the right time, and accessing courage to take actions.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you describe that. Brené Brown talks about courage being vulnerability. So you can't be courageous without some vulnerability. And very few of us want to be in that vulnerability stage, because it's a terrifying place to be naked almost in front of a group of people that can judge us. There's something so sensitive about the vulnerability, but we cannot be courageous without it. And that's how, as you're talking, that's how I see you, that courage to be vulnerable, to put your head above the parapet, and sometimes come back down again, because it is a little bit scary, but to keep putting it up, because as again, I'm quoting Brené Brown, she talks about it as a practice. We all have the ability to practice courage-based skills. And that means it means for some of us gently stepping out into courage, or bravely stepping out. And there is no right or wrong. It's about doing it perhaps consistently to allow ourselves to experience it.
I think that's a great reflection. Yeah, I love Brené Brown. And it's about leading with vulnerability. And it's kind of got me thinking about some other ideas now, because what I think has really helped my development in showing up as the coach that I want to be and build the business is doing the inner work with my own coaches and therapists. Yeah. And the more deeper I've gone into myself, the more comfortable I am holding space for other people who are ready or willing to do the same. But it was never a moment sooner for me. So I kind of wrote something once before, and I'd heard it before, and it really resonated with me. It's like, you can only go as deep with your clients as if you've been willing to go in yourself. And I knew it intellectually. So there's a lot of things that I knew intellectually on my journey of coaching, but then when I actually embodied it and took it on, that's when the changes happen. Because I think there's a lot of coaches, myself included, that we read personal development books or business how-to books, coaching books, to know stuff. But knowing it intellectually doesn't help us. Embodying it and integrating it does. And again, it comes back to the vulnerability and the courage to take certain actions, however little or big they might be, and then reap what's cultivated out of that.
Yeah. We say that to coaches. If you haven't done the work, you can't be with your clients and expect them to do the work. So it is interesting to me in my career, because I have met many coaches who've never hired a coach or never experienced their own depth of development. And that's interesting for me, because I think if we're expecting, whether it's group work, whether it's one-to-one, if we're expecting our clients to be brave and courageous and we haven't been there, what's that say about the type of questions we ask, the type of listening we do, the type of, when I'm listening, for example, when I'm listening to you, I'm also listening to myself. I'm listening to images that might appear that don't make sense to me, but might make sense to you. So without a depth of understanding of ourselves, perhaps our coaching remains surface level, and perhaps our marketing remains surface level. And when it's surface level, it doesn't feel, for me anyway, it doesn't feel as authentic. And you talked about that time and time again in your posts about how authenticity is so important.
Yeah, I love that reflection. And it just has me think about moments where, I've had to really go deep into myself and really face demons. And it kind of reminded me of, I went on a personal development, what would you call it? It's like a residential. It was 6 days. It was one of the most deepest pieces of work I've ever done. It was about 4 years ago, and we did theory of the mind and theory of the reality, a lot of stuff underpinned by Heidegger's work. But essentially it's like, what's real and what's not real? Who are we? And there was a lot of inner child work in there, and really, really deep conversations. And I think it was the first time I could honestly say that I'd really stood up and been naked in front of a group of people, to use your metaphor earlier. And the microphone, something that the trainer said that day, and that it really pierced me. And he said, that thing that you think you've got, you don't have it, it has you. And for some reason, it just really pierced me in that moment. I thought I was turning up to learn something about coaching, like something I could learn to apply to someone else. But this work was so transformative and so deep. And what happened is I saw people stand up and start sharing their story and break down in tears. And I noticed this energy change in the room. It was like a domino effect. People were witnessing everyone else's courage and vulnerability. And then the next person would talk and the next person would talk. And I eventually stood up and spoke, and I broke down in tears in front of this group of people. And I think that was really the first entry point to me taking more depth into my work and holding that same space for people.
Powerful. Very. And I notice as you're speaking, Brinsley, how interesting the tone of your voice is, and how you have moments of saying something and pausing a little bit and allowing whatever is coming up for you to really resonate. And it sounds like what the moments at the retreat, as your voice is speaking, it sounds like that. And the language that you put out on social media also sounds like you, very much like you, and that we're talking today. Real, thoughtful. You sometimes have spaces in between the way you type. You'll give a space between one sentence and the next. And that allows me to breathe in some of your teachings and learnings. So how do you do that? That's so interesting. And again, feels different to me.
Can you define that for me? Because I was like, oh, how do I do that? But what is that?
Yes. Well, I think it's like an offering, then a pause, and then another offering or a question that you do to invite people to start thinking in a deeper way.
I've not thought deeply about the way that I communicate. I've never thought about it. I feel like it's something that's happening naturally or organic. And there is an interesting exchange that I had with some coaches about the medium of writing, and something that I'd struggled with, because I haven't actually been posting online what I think for a long time. So my business building journey has been 5 years, but I've only really been posting my opinion and my stuff, Marie, for like the last 6 months.
Okay.
Before I was like hidden underneath, like doing a few invitations, having a few referrals, pop my head above the parapet, then go back down, sharing some podcasts. That was a useful thing for me to do because I was promoting someone else. And I think this is an important topic to talk about at some point, the distinction between being behind the flyer and becoming the flyer, which I noticed. But in terms of like that communication style, yeah, I think for me, it's natural to write in that way, feels natural. And I think I've got a background in design. So there might be something empathetic in it because the way we lay out words on a page or anything on a website is actually, when it's done well, it's empathetic. It's got the receiver in mind. However, that's not consciously happening for me when I'm writing. I'm just writing in my style, which I'm almost writing spontaneously. But it took me so long to be able to just be spontaneous. Even to be on this call with you, there's like, right now I'm allowing myself to formulate ideas whilst I'm speaking. Before, when I put my hand up in the training room and I was scared and my heartbeat, I'd formulated what I was going to say before it came round. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to say this. Because it was all about not messing up in front of people. Because if I messed up in front of people, I wouldn't be good enough. And if I wasn't good enough, then I'm out of whatever it was I was out of, the family, the social group. So the style of communication is coming from a place of allowing myself to think and breathe into what it is that I'm saying.
And I'm so glad you are recognizing that. You said yes straight away to the podcast when I reached out to you. And we hadn't planned any particular questions to think about today. And it's evolving. And that's how we like to kind of have conversations with people that are real and evolving. But what it seems to me what you're modeling here, Brinsley, is this courage in motion right now. And we might have, vulnerability hangover after the recording. And it's done and it's going to go out there no matter what, which is so fascinating, right? Same with me. Who knows whether I'm doing a great job interviewing you and getting the key comments or the key points from you, but it's going to go out there anyway. Mm-hmm. So when coaches hesitate, and when you and I hesitated initially, how do you support them to move through that hesitation and move into taking action, even though they might still be terrified?
That's a great question. And my initial thinking is there's no one size fits all, because with coaching, it's about meeting someone where they're at and what is truly going on for them in the moment. How do I help coaches move through that? I think there's lots of different things happening in the space. There's the relationship, which for me is like the crucible of the work that we do. And in building a certain relationship with someone creates a certain amount of safety. And I think what we all want really is to feel safe and that we belong. So in creating like a safe environment to just explore the fears and the doubts, but also hold a space of challenge after walking the walk myself, so to speak, or an analogy I like to use is, it's kind of similar to the one about you can't go as deep with your clients as you haven't been willing to go in yourself. But it's another one is like when we walk through doors on our personal development journey, it's a little bit easier to like look over our shoulders or stand next to our client and say, look, it's all right. It's all right to go through there. Come on, we can go through there together and we can explore your fears and doubts about it. But at the end of the day, the action is going to be where the learning is going to happen. So it's about feeling safe to take actions. But the conversations can go in lots of different ways. So I wouldn't say I have like a unique methodology that breaks through fear, because there's so many different conversations to be had. But what I notice from clients that I work with, there's a certain amount of readiness. And actually, that readiness they didn't have in the first conversation. So a huge part, I think, of a breakthrough for many clients is the investment and having a conversation about money and commitment. And it's a conversation I now love to have. But before, I wanted to get off the call as quickly as possible. If someone didn't have enough time or they didn't have enough money, which is the two main things. But what I noticed in this conversation was all of the stuff that comes up when it gets real. So we have a great discovery call and some coaching conversations. And then when it gets to what the commitment is, all the stuff that comes up in that moment is the same stuff that's been holding them back in the area of their life that they want to move forward. So being able to hold that space for them and have that conversation with them is a real breakthrough moment. Yeah. And investment in ourselves is energetic. So I see a huge change in myself and my clients after a commitment and an investment, because it's energy in motion, to use your great phrase earlier. It is energy in motion. And then we've done the work and then we continue to do it. And it's about building momentum. Yeah. The other thing I'll just quickly speak to as well is I love to talk about and explore with people about the mind and the thinking that we do and what's real and what's our thoughts and what's it like to observe our thoughts and recognize, is that me? Is that just a thought? I've got another thought that's opposing that thought. So then it can't be me. So then perhaps I have a choice about which thought that I choose to engage with. And this is a big piece of work I like to do with clients and myself. Choosing the thoughts that we engage with, being able to sit and observe them and see them for what they are. Because I think once we can make those distinctions and the nuance of the thinking mind and then what the heart wants, let's say to build a coaching business, it can free up a bit of space to maybe take uncomfortable actions.
Yeah, I love that freeing up of space. Richard Schwartz talks about our internal family systems and the different parts that pop up and speak to us when we are moving into something new or different times in our lives. And if we constantly are filled with these different parts that pop up and say, don't do it, it's too scary, you're going to fall off that cliff if you have a conversation about money. If we're so filled with that, there is no space to get curious about the other person or to even invite people into your work. Because I think I'll say to coaches, there is no one else like you. And there might be thousands of people searching for you, but because they can't hear your voice, they can't find you. So to me, that there's thousands of people waiting to find you because you're the one that is going to help them. But if we cannot practice these moments of courage and stepping out the comfort zone, then they're never going to be able to find us. And we go back to doing unfulfilled work because we have to put bread on the table to support our families.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And it kind of had me think of the distinction of personal development training and coach training and how the two are very distinct, but so needed for coaches. Just realised my charger's not plugged in. Thankfully, I plugged it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like I've been lucky enough to be on some really great personal development courses and lucky enough to be on some amazing coaching courses. And coaching is really like learning how to. But I think what I notice with a lot of coaches I speak to, there's a lot of learning in the how-to space. Yeah. And what I would like to encourage or bring more into the coaching space for practitioners and more of that deep inner work, because it's the personal development stuff that is going to meet the coaching technique. And once the two marry up together, that's when the magic happens. That's when we can hold space for conversations that are uncomfortable about money or time and support someone on choosing consciously what they're going to do rather than say something, jump off the call, and that be the end of the call.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with you. And I know Janine are very passionate about it. The way we've designed our training program is you go through the journey yourself. and you work on your own purpose, values, mission. We look at the saboteurs. We look at those limiting beliefs. Because if you don't do that, again, we talked about it before, how can you support your clients?
Right.
So as we're coming to wrapping up our conversation, Brinsley, and we have coaches out there that might have understood they need to take action, but now they're understanding that maybe it's their childhood wounds that are stopping them taking the action. Maybe it's those voices inside themselves that have become so loud, it's actually stopping them from having the space to be brave. What advice would you share with them?
Oh, so much. But I think straight off the bat, the simple one is work with a coach. It's so important. Invest in yourself and make a commitment to work with a coach. If this is something that you really want to do, build a coaching business. The things that held me back, and I kind of identified 3 or 5 core things, but procrastinating until I was perfect, fear of putting myself out there, trying to figure it all out in my head, no accountability to take action. Those things I got to work through with a coach. And I think a lot of coaches would resonate with those 4 stories. So entering into a process of commitment to take on all the stuff, the conditioning we've taken on, is a pursuit worth taking. Because not only do we benefit from it, our children benefit from it, our partners benefit from it, because we show up in the world in a different way. So we actually owe it to ourselves and those that we love to take on these pursuits, because then we can be the full expression of ourselves. And who doesn't want to be the full expression of ourselves for ourselves and our children and partners and parents and all of that? So it's actually huge. It's a much bigger topic than building a business and becoming a coach. It's like energetically who we are in the world, and how does that affect our relationships?
So beautiful. I think that's a wonderful place to wrap up, Brinsley. I know our listeners will want to find out more about you, your work. How can they do that?
So yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on there, Brinsley Kazak Coaching. I think there's a business page, but I've got a personal page, and it's Brinsley Kazak. You can add me. You'll see that I'm a mentor, coach and sidekick for coaches wanting to build their business. Yeah, and send me an email also. My email is brinsleyKazak@gmail.com. And it'd be lovely. It'd be lovely to hear from coaches, hear what they took from this conversation, if anything resonated, and what they might do off the back of the conversation. But yeah, happy to have a chat with anyone, see where it goes.
Yeah, beautiful. Brinsley, thank you for making the time. I'm so grateful for you sharing your wisdom, sharing your experience, sharing your own journey and challenges. And I know there's so much more to come from your work and your courage. So I appreciate you being here with me today.
Thank you. I can't believe how quick it went. And I really appreciate your invitation and the way that you held the space and such great reflections and questions. I've loved it. So hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah, let's do that. Listeners, thank you for listening in. If you've loved this podcast, share it with your community. If you want more, let us know. If you've got ideas for other podcasts or topic you'd like Janine and I to focus on, send us an email, send us a message, connect with us on LinkedIn, and keep listening and sharing. And thank you.
Thanks for listening. You can find out more about us on our website, www.empower-world.com, and on our social media networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Be empowered.